You're listening to The John Hammer Show, thoughts and discussions from a preacher, disciple of Jesus, author, poet, and pastor. Brought to you by the Sunrise Podcast Network. For more information about Sunrise and or the Sunrise Podcast Network, check out isunrise.org. This podcast is also sponsored in part by Seattle Bible College. For more information about the school, check out seattlebiblecollege.edu.
Well, welcome everybody to the John Hammer Show and my Dear Young Man kind of series episodes here on the podcast. Appreciate the listener support and sharing and rating and listening, all that you do to help us spread the message of hope to men, and especially through this series. And I'm here today with a good friend, Christopher Wall, and so really honored to have him on the podcast, and I believe you guys will gain a lot of helpful information and insight into life. I've had a lot of great conversations with Christopher over the years, and I guess, man, I probably met you almost 20 years ago. I'm 41, and you came to faith in your early 20s. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's probably been about,
I'd say 2002-ish.
Okay.
Somewhere in there.
Yeah. So it's been almost 20 years. And I actually remember I was talking about it on one of my earlier episodes with Nate Drahota.
Yeah.
That I remember it was my 30th birthday, and you and your wife Christina and Grace had thrown in this like surprise party for me, and so you guys came out and with some other people, and I remember chit-chatting with you, and I knew you had done some martial arts training at the time, and so I would think I was just like, oh, so you're doing martial arts, or we were just kind of, so this is like 11 years ago, we're just chit-chatting, you're like, no, I'm doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I was like, oh, what's that like? And you're like, oh, are you interested? And I'm like, I don't know, I just always saw, I guess, like, because of some of our experience with like the dark arts or like witchcraft or like different things, like I had seen and read stories of certain people mixing martial arts with like satanic ritual or like idol worship, or like different energies or things that they were like trying to conjure up, like spirits. And I was like, oh man, I'm not supposed to be around that stuff. But I always regretted that I didn't do wrestling growing up. So you're like, I remember you at that party, you were like, well, no, it's really more like kind of a form of wrestling. It's a grappling sport. It's really a non-striking sport. I mean, there is, in the self-defense side, there is some striking a little bit, but for the most part in the sport side, it's not striking. It's a grappling art. And you're like, it's more like, just the using physiology and an understanding of anatomy and leverage. And I remember you really piqued my interest, and I was like, oh, that's different than what I thought I was going to hear, and I was like, I was interested. And I think then having some kids at that time, I guess would all my kids have been born? Well, almost all of them would have been born by then, except for my baby, and just being busy in life. But then through YouTube, I started seeing, all these jiu-jitsu videos, and so I reached back out to you. It was like almost 10 years after you talked to me about it. Yeah. And was like, hey, I've never forgot our conversation, and I'm hooked on all these YouTube videos. So like, what do I do? Where do I go? And you told me about, well, hey, check this out, and ended up getting to go to the same training center that you've been training at, and everything here at Gracie Jiu-Jitsu Mukilteo, with instructor Andre Landertone. Right. What a great guy. And anyhow, so this is kind of my introduction for Christopher here. So I'm indebted to Christopher because I've really been enjoying my time on the mats and have tons to learn. But it's a really enriching experience, I think, as a man, to have something that to challenge yourself with, and something to learn. And I'm sure we'll talk a lot about it. But anyway, I'd love for you just to give everybody, as I'm giving a little context for, that's partially how I know you. But I'd love you just give it an overview of your story and kind of where you come from and where you're at. Okay.
All right. Well, thank you for inviting me here. This is fun. This is a new experience for me. Where to start? I was thinking about how do I give a 50,000-foot view of my life.
Right.
I was born in the Pacific Northwest, raised in Edmonds, pretty much my whole life, and I went to Meadowdale High School, and martial arts, I guess, started that basically when I was like 12 or 13.
Oh, okay.
I started Taekwondo.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, Ian, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
we started together, actually, at
Oh,
Francis
I didn't
Anderson
know that.
Center.
I didn't know that Ian used to train too.
Well, we did that for a couple years. It was like
Okay.
one of those things, like buddy thing. We
Yeah.
signed up, and it was Francis Anderson Center. But anyway, that kind of started my whole like journey into martial arts, was with Taekwondo.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you know, high school, I graduated high school, and then I enlisted in the Marine Corps. And I guess to sum it up, my involvement in martial arts came out of a need to, you know, defend myself. Like I felt like I was attracted to it because, you know, growing up watching all the martial arts movies, you know, Bruce Lee, and Steven Seagal, and you're seeing him like fight the bad guys and stuff. Well, you know, I had a bit of a rough childhood. You know, I was picked on a lot, and I saw that as a way to empower myself, to defend myself, and maybe, you know, not be picked on as much.
Right.
And that started the journey, and then from there it just evolved. And eventually got into grappling martial arts.
Did you train all through high school too, or? So
yeah, high school I did a little bit of the Taekwondo. And then it was off and on. But I ended up getting into sports and athletics early. 'Cause, you know, my parents blessed me with that. I was able to do pretty much every sport you can think of. I was doing baseball, basketball, soccer, skiing. So I developed this athletic base.
Yeah,
right?
Gotcha.
And martial arts was another extension of that, but then also the self-defense aspect. And that, you know, being a kid who had a bit of a rough childhood, I was a bit socially awkward, you know, just dealing with people. I didn't understand how to interact with the kids, and I would get teased terribly. But I learned early on that if I could get them to stop if I stood up for myself, and I drew that boundary.
Yeah.
And some of my choices there probably weren't the best being a young child. I got into a few fights. Yeah. You know, but I learned like, I can stop the teasing if I set this physical boundary. Yeah. And fortunately, the athletic base that I had helped me, you know, evolve. And then through high school, I did athletics. You know, I was on the football team, and that helped socially as well. So the martial arts went to the wayside. Oh, gotcha. But at the time, I had a friend named Skip, and he was really big into martial arts and working out. Okay. And I'll never forget, I think it was 1993, he had this videotape, and it was the UFC. Oh, right? Okay. And he's like, hey, let's watch this. And that's the first time I saw Royce Gracie go into the UFC and basically annihilate everybody. Yeah. You know, he was like 170 pounds, you know, 6 foot, and he's like choking out 270-pound wrestlers, like collegiate national champion wrestlers, right? Right. And that just cemented into my brain. That was like the pinnacle moment. Like, okay, there's something there. So it's funny, in his garage in high school, we're like rolling around on the cement floor, like trying to choke each other. We don't know what we're doing. It's just totally.
But you watched it.
We're like rewinding the videos. I'm like, oh, you know.
How did you do that?
Yeah. So to fast forward a little bit, after I enlisted in the Marine Corps, I always had that in the back of my brain. Like, you know, I want to learn more martial arts and more grappling type stuff. And, you know, during the Marine Corps, I had some opportunities to train in different things. Like, you know, there was some boxing, and there was, when I was stationed in Pendleton, I actually joined an Aikido school. Oh, okay. Interesting. And I was training in Aikido for a while, about 1.5 years. Okay. And that was interesting, but totally useless, with the exception of a few like joint manipulations and wrist locks and things. Okay. And then I actually had an opportunity to pilot the McMAP program, which is the Marine Corps Martial Arts program. Oh, yeah. At the time, in 2000, they were just transitioning into the new program. Oh, okay. And what that looked like is they took some NCOs. I was a corporal at the time. They took some NCOs and like from different units and like, hey, anybody interested in martial arts? And they grabbed you and they would throw you into this like, it was just martial artists getting together and beating each other up. And they were like, we have this framework that we want to incorporate like more grappling and more. So they were looking at judo. They were looking at Gracie Jiu-Jitsu because the Army had been doing that for a while. You know, since '96, like the Rangers had Gracie Jiu-Jitsu and stuff. And so that was interesting to see the evolution, like where they were going. So the Marine Corps was moving into this more grappling was added in instead of the what they had was what's called linear in-system nervous system engagement, which is really just moves on how to kill people.
Oh, okay.
You literally grab them, throw them down, and it's like a heel stomp to the face.
Gotcha. Okay.
So after I got out, and then it was more martial arts, I got into this like mixed martial arts, like this thing called Jungi Musul, which was kind of a Taekwondo mix of everything. Okay. So there was a little bit of grappling in there.
Yeah, I think actually that's when I first met you, I think, because I remember hearing little bits and pieces and meeting a couple other guys that trained with you through like a network of friends.
Yeah.
You know?
We had Elcon. And Scott McVeigh was the guy I was training with.
And you had not really come to church much yet, or you were just kind of like exploring,
just starting it.
Yeah, like, what's this all about?
Yeah. And I met Christina.
Okay. Wife. Yeah.
Yeah. And then so when you were talking to me, it was a mixture of that. And then I just started Gracing Combatives. So in 2009.
Okay.
And I don't remember when your 30th birthday was.
Well, I would have been in 2010. 2010.
2010, right. Okay. So just about that, I was just about a year in to Gracie Combatives.
Oh, okay. So you just kind of started that, yeah.
And I was training at North Sound Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in Lake Stevens under Professor Simpson.
Yeah.
And so I was getting that world of the Gracie Combatives, which is more self-defense oriented. And then the sport. Yeah. Sport side of Jiu-Jitsu, which is a whole nother world.
Right. Yeah.
Sort of. So that's kind of the... Wow, that kind of was
that's kind of the martial art journey.
A back and forth.
Yeah. Well, what led you to want to serve in the military, like out of high school? Was it something you had like thought of for quite a while? Did your dad serve, or
Yeah. So that was very interesting because my father he didn't serve in the military. Right. Actually, he was all part of the counterculture and the hippie movement. And he was very much in, the intellectual, and went back east and was in Boston and around Harvard area for a while. And his whole thing was military was like, his perspective was formed by the Vietnam War and actually thinking we shouldn't be there and being involved. And so that was like the last thing on his mind. Okay. And I'll never forget this though. My father, he's a wonderful man. He's very intelligent. He's very caring, but he's very emotional. There was some fire in our house. I dealt with some aggro moments with my father. So I being a son, you want to have the respect of your dad, and you want to feel like he's proud of you. Right. And I think I was 14, and I was watching the movie Full Metal Jacket, which I don't know if you're familiar with that movie, but that's
I don't think I actually ever saw it.
Every
but
Marine has to see Full Metal Jacket, or has seen it. It's like required, right? Right? Like as soon as you go through boot camp and you come out, it's like everybody watches Full Metal Jacket. But it's Stanley Kubrick film, about the Marine Corps, and it starts with these guys that go through boot camp, and it follows them through Vietnam. And in that, there's half the movie is basically boot camp. And my dad comes down and he sees me watching it. And he just says, "Oh, you could do that. You could be a Marine." And I'll never forget that moment because it's like I got his simultaneous blessing and confidence in me. Yeah. And it just stuck with me. So I was like, oh, okay. So that was in the back of my brain. And then going through high school, I was an okay student, but I wasn't the best student. So I had graduating, I had this transition thinking where, okay, I could graduate high school and I didn't have good enough grades to get right into college.
Mm-hmm.
So I saw my life as working from home in a, or working or living at home, working like a regular job, a menial job, busting my butt in school. That didn't appeal to me at all.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So I was like, what about the military?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I had been approached by a recruiter when I was like 17. And the Marine Corps was a Marine Corps recruiter. And I was like, okay, yeah. And I'll never forget what my dad said. He's like,
yeah.
And I thought about it. And I was like, okay. The other thing my dad said was like, if you're not going to go to college, you need a skill, right? Get a skill, something like a trade you can turn into revenue for, a job. And I looked at the Marine Corps, and they actually were offering, a wide range of skills in communications, and that stood out to me. And they have communication electronic maintenance, which is where you can go and learn to repair their radio systems. So I signed up for communication electronics technician, or 2800 was the field. And so I looked at it and I was like, okay, I can join the military, get some adventure, but the warrior side appealed to me too, because the Marine Corps is like everyone's a rifleman first, so you get the GI Joe stuff, you get to learn how to be an infantryman, but then also you have your job. Okay. So I looked at it like the best of both worlds. Well, I can go get this technical education and learn the warrior stuff. I get to run around and shoot rifles and throw grenades and things. And that's the course I took.
Wow. Yeah. Well, you said a couple things. I'm going to rewind a little and then also go off on another thing you said, which I think is really important for guys to be thinking about right now, and for parents and people that love young men as well. But one is the power of a father's blessing. Like that's a real theme that has become really important to me, like personally, as a son and as a father, and then just as a student of the Bible. And like, I think that even Christians have kind of, it's really present in Judaism. But I think Christians, obviously, like our faith comes out of the roots of Abraham and of Judaism. Like we wouldn't have the Christian faith without without the Jewish faith. And so, anyway, but that's one of the things I think Christians have lost from the Bible is the power of blessing. And some studies that have been done on why is such a minority of Jews so successful in entertainment or economics and business globally, and there's conspiracy theories about that on some depending on which way you want to take it, but they can trace that there's a difference that's made because every Sabbath, like the father blesses the children and he prays the high priestly blessing from Numbers chapter 6. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face shine upon you. May he lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. And that's when the Lord said, so you will put my name on the children of Israel and I will bless them. So they say that. And then to the boys, they say, may you be like Ephraim and Manasseh, the blessed tribes. And may you be like, to the girls, they say, may you be like, I might mix up the order a little bit, as may you be like Rebecca and Sarah and Rachel and Leah. And so they instill in them, like, this is who you are. You're to be blessed. You're to be a leader. You're to be successful. And over and over and over again. And I was reading this like Hollywood Reporter maybe article on like the actor Shia LaBeouf, and he's had all sorts of, he's like a very vulnerable like person to interview. He'll like kind of let it all hang out, but he tells these stories about the brokenness of his family and different things like that. But he tells this time where like his mom is giving him a bath. He's like maybe 4 or 5 years old or something, and she's like, you're gonna work with Steven Spielberg. And he's like, and then I did. It's like, so it's just when I hear the power of your dad's words over you,
speaking these things in their lives.
And it wasn't just like a rant. It's like you said, it like it landed on you because you felt something that day. You felt like, my dad thinks that I have the courage to be one of the bravest soldiers in the world. So something rose in you that connected you to that.
Yeah.
And when we call out blessing over, and I think we all need people in our lives that can speak blessing over us. Like we obviously all need discipline and correction, but I think that if we don't couple discipline and correction with voices of blessing,
absolutely.
Then we have a lot of hurt and people are disenfranchised and angry and bitter at family situations, at dads or the lack of a dad. And so anyway, that's just so powerful to me, like that we recover that, and we, I want to bless my kids more than I correct them, and I correct them. We discipline, but I want to be a voice of blessing, and I think that's so significant. And so then when you went into the, you talked about, and your dad also talking to you about trades, and I think. Like a lot of people don't realize, like, just getting a college degree, and I'm all for college. Like, I'm actually in a program to get a joint master's and doctorate in, like Christian leadership kind of studies. So I think education can be great in certain, fields or aspects depending on what you're going to do.
Yeah.
Right. But a lot of people are getting degrees and they don't use them at all, or they're getting a degree in something that can't get them a job. Like I've heard these stories of like people that get doctorates in humanities, and there's like just a few like professor positions available. And then they're like working some part-time job somewhere, got this massive student loan debt. And it's like, well, you got to pay attention. So like people have neglected the trades or just learning a skill, and there's actually part of the program I'm in a ministry training environment. Their church actually works with like is it apprenticeships, U.S. apprenticeships? I'm trying to remember, but there's like so many careers people can get through apprenticeships now. Like you can even become a full-blown engineer just through apprenticeship. In some fields or some cases. So anyway, they have recommended that a lot. So you were trained in the Marines for the career that you're doing now then?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I actually looked at, with the influence of my father, who, if we want to tie this back to the role of the father and get into like how important a positive male role model or even the father specifically is in a family unit, but like having that foresight, that experience, that wisdom of living life, and then trying to help a young mind project into the future, because I don't think children think
right.
They don't think beyond the next day, like what am I going to eat for lunch?
Right.
And so he was really great at making me think about my future, right? And he basically said, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but if you want to have a future in society, he's like, you need to consider, are you going to go to college? What do you want to do in college? Are you going to work a trade? And whatever you're going to do, master it, put 100% effort into it, but think ahead. Yeah. So when I was looking at joining the military, I was like, okay, am I going to go into the military and am I going to be a career warrior? Am I going to be like, am I going to do this thing and be like, the best of the best and be that tip of the spear type of thing? I was like, no, probably not. I'm not really that interested in being, special operations or whatever. But I wanted to have a skill. I wanted to have a skill I could translate outside of the military. And to me, that was telecommunications or communications. So I saw that as an opportunity to get an education and a technical skill. At the same time, I wanted to do the young man stuff and run around and explore the world. And join this group that is about serving and protecting the country. And
how many years did you serve for?
4 years.
4 years?
Yeah.
Okay. So, and did you end up on any tours? Were you in combat or?
No.
Okay.
No, actually I was in 96 to 2000. So I got lucky. I got right in that.
Okay.
Nothing was happening, right?
How important did you feel like it was to be in the, how much did it impact your development as a man?
Oh, big time. So having that base from what I learned from my father and, just growing up around my peers and my friends. And then when you join the military, it's so regimented. Everything there's a lot of things that are pretty much taken care of for you. I mean, your food, your clothes, all this stuff. However, the traditions and the discipline and, focusing on things like integrity and being a man of your word and being on, doing the things that are mechanistically important to having a structured life. You learn that in the military for sure. But then you get examples of what it means to be a good man who is actually leading, or a good woman, because there are lots of women serving in the military, that are conducting themselves in an honorable way.
Right.
And when I think about honor, I think about, what does that mean? It's are you trustworthy? To me, that means you're trustworthy. You're going to do what you say you're going to do. You're going to be where you say you're going to be. And people can trust that you are going to do your job well and trained well.
Right.
Right.
What was the, do you feel like it also, did it like really confront your weaknesses in a major way? Like, was there, like, what was the hardest part of that kind of transformation? Like, what, could you speak to that a little?
Yeah. Well, like, you spoke with Nate, and he talked a lot about what it was like to go through boot camp.
Yeah.
Very similar experiences, right? So, like, boot camp itself is more mentally challenging than anything. It's physically, I went there in shape. So, you get tired, you get worn out, but it's not to the point where you can't do anything there unless you come and you're not in shape. But the mental aspect of having to deal with the unknown, like you wake up at 4 a.m. and you just don't know what the day holds next. It could be anything, and it's so intense and so painful at the time. You get put in this mental space of like, oh, if I can make it to lunchtime, or once you make it to lunchtime, because at lunch you kind of get to sit for a few seconds and shove your face full of food, and then you're back out the door, right? And then it's like, if I can make it to chow at dinner time, and if I can make it to bedtime, and if I fall asleep, right? And so you have to find this mental space to push through the uncomfortable situations. Yeah. Right? You have to find this help yourself along mentally, because if you start to dwell on how much it sucks, it's like,
right.
You can get dragged into that hole, that downward spiral of only focusing on how bad it is.
Right.
So you have to find this mental toughness.
Yeah.
Right. And for me, going through boot camp, I didn't have the Lord at the time. Right. And I saw these guys that were praying. I'd see them, and they're praying in their bunk, and that was a whole world of strength to draw on that I didn't understand at the time. So I remember literally praying to my ancestors. Like, I'm laying in my rack, and I'm like, "Oh, Grandpa, if you're watching me." I mean, this is silly now that I think about it, being a Christian, right?
No, but thank you for sharing it, because I think it's powerful. Because I think when we're put in an extreme situation, I think it kind of reveals our need for God, because we're looking for something higher or bigger or more transcendent than us to draw power or strength from. Yeah, exactly. Right? And when we're in a, whether it's a leadership position or a parenting situation or it's like, help. Where do I call out to help?
Looking to offload that stress somewhere other than inside yourself, where it just eats away at you, right?
Yeah.
So the military itself refined me in ways where it pushed me through really tough situations. And I learned that, hey, I'm going to survive. And I found coping mechanisms, right?
Right. Yeah.
And I think that's a good thing for everyone to go through. And to tie that back to Jiu-Jitsu specifically, right? We go through a lot of pressure, a lot of tough situations, and you learn to become comfortable in uncomfortable situations, like Peter says all the time.
Yeah. And there is something about like putting yourself in that stressful environment that actually lowers your stress overall, because you're like intentionally, willfully taking it on, And I've heard psychologists talk about that, is different like when you're just like submersed in like random stresses that are like out of your control than when you like choose, like, I'm going to go for this goal, or I'm going to confront this challenge. Like what it does for you, to develop you psychologically, mentally. It's been really helpful for me as a pastor, because, this is pretty much like every day for me, except I don't have a mic in front of me all the time. I mean, I guess on Sundays I do, I'm speaking a message or whatever when I'm doing an interview, but you sit and talk to people and you deal with a lot of really stressful situations that people are, sometimes you're at people's best moments, like they have a great answer to prayer, they got the new job they've been really trying for, or they have a baby, or, they have some great life moment to share. But most of the time it's because everything's falling apart, or their marriage is in trouble, or their kids going astray, or they're like overwhelmed with spiritual, emotional issues, trauma, spiritual warfare. I mean, you got like all these things that people bring. So you're just kind of in a season like, COVID-19, like the level of stress and depression, that just anxiety that the average person, it's like, it's off the charts. I mean, it's almost that they say like, the average level of anxiety and depression that hits about like, we just had a guy that spoke here that has a doctorate in psychology, and he's a pastor now, but he still kind of follows the psych data, and he's like, basically 25% or so of Americans would typically deal with like a level of depression or anxiety that could be diagnosed. And he's like, and they're saying during the pandemic, it's 9 out of 10, so you look at this craziness. So, I think for me, of course, like my relationship with Jesus and prayer and biblical meditation and just spending time with him is my number one thing.
Absolutely.
But like
Absolutely.
to have a physical outlet like jiu-jitsu now as a pastor with all these stresses, and for my job to be sitting and talking, or sitting and studying, or sitting and praying, or to have that physical and mental connection, because it's as much mental, or if not more so, than it is physical even.
Yeah.
But to have that connection for me has been like a godsend, because even I started feeling a bunch of stress creep back in. We had a real stressful season, and then it seems like things kind of mellowed out, and then it just feels like the stress just kind of enraged this fall again. And I was like, what is going on? And I got so busy with church work and stuff that I was missing my going as frequently to jiu-jitsu. And I started noticing like, this isn't the whole enchilada or anything, but it's a part of what I realized I have to discipline my schedule, because when I have an outlet like this, it really does help lower my stress level.
God gave us this flesh vessel, right? And we need to be stewards of it. And,
absolutely.
And, number one is Christ. The focus on him. Like,
absolutely.
I don't know how people are getting through the pandemic with the stress without Jesus, honestly.
I agree.
There's days where, the prayer and just the fasting and just looking to the Lord, and you get that word, you get that, something pops out in the Bible, or you get an impression, right? And it's like, okay, I'm okay. Everything's going to be okay. It's in God's hands.
Yep,
right?
that's right.
And then outside of that, you have the physical aspect, our bodies, right? So. The martial arts for me, jiu-jitsu specific, it's just a tool to stay healthy and empower myself physically. So I'm not trying to make it into something that it isn't. Right. It's not supplanting God or a spiritual outlet or anything like that. But it is really incredibly powerful, empowering for us physically to have those mechanistic moments where you're on the mat and the only thing you're thinking about is somebody trying to choke you. And you're like, okay, how do I escape this? You're not worried about what's going on outside the gym. But ultimately, Jesus is our refuge.
Right? So, that's awesome. Well, when you through training jiu-jitsu, like what are some of the big like kind of takeaways, or like if you're trying to I'm not necessarily recruiting for our school, but hey, you can always join us on the mat. I got another guy that works for us at the church that's just been checking it out. But what, if you were trying to explain to somebody, like, what are some of the benefits or things that you've, like, some of the main lessons or things that it kind of has helped you with, what would you lay out for them?
I think confidence in knowing that when you train long enough, specifically in Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, which is focused in self-defense first, it empowers you with techniques that that you can deploy to defend yourself or maybe defend your family. And it takes away that, I'll give you an example. So having trained jiu-jitsu enough now, sometimes when you see, like, I see a really large person walking around, I don't think about, man, I would man, if that guy attacked me, I'd be in super trouble.
Uh-huh.
I'm thinking about, that'd be interesting because, okay, first, number one, I'd probably try and run away. But if I wasn't able to run away, I could probably take him down. I could probably, at least minimize the damage to where I can escape, et cetera. So it's this confidence level that you have where you've learned the techniques and the skill to defend yourself. And then that is really, it's a powerful thing because then there's less fear, right? There's less, especially for women. So like I promote Jiu-Jitsu for women as much as I can because it's really the only martial art that really creates an equalizer as much as possible between the size differences, between a larger woman or a larger man, someone attacking you. Compared to other martial arts, which rely on strikes and kicks, where you're really, it's your size and physical strength to try and subdue the other person. Right. In Jiu-Jitsu, that's not the case. I mean, you're using leverage and technique, and if you can get someone to the ground, you have a better fighting chance. Right? Even like I recall a story of a female student. She was training for like 6 weeks down in Torrance. And she got attacked at a bus stop at night. If I remember correctly, she was like 5'4", about 130 pounds. The guy who attacked her was 6 foot, 200 pounds. He grabbed her from behind, dragged her behind the bus stop, and pinned her down. But she had learned how to do the trap and roll. And she trap and rolled him and escaped and got up and ran away. And, I mean, what other martial art equips you to do that? Right? So that, training and the physical exercise, it's the technique and the skill that you get that empowers you to be confident and have less fear and, that you can handle the situation.
Yeah, it's interesting how many, I don't know, I've probably heard these things before, but it just feels like there's been a little bit of a resurgence. I don't know if it's podcasts I'm listening to or just, and even conversations I'm having where men will express sometimes that like when they get in a room of other men, they just like, they don't feel man enough or they don't feel like they measure up. And maybe it's like, sometimes it's physical stature, but I think a lot of times it's deeper, like it's because of their upbringing or lack of affirmation, and they really kind of have this curiosity about their identity or, how do I stack up against this, whether it's even like a party, like more like a social party, like a event you're at, somebody's birthday party or a company party or a church environment or something in the community where there's other, and guys like that are like, some that are like really strong and you would never think they would have thoughts like that because on the outward you're like, more than 9 out of 10 times you're kind of the biggest, strongest, toughest looking dude in the crowd, but yet they could feel that way. Or hearing stories about guys that are in gangs and have been like, brutally violent, but yet they're full of fear. And you think like these guys are like, like born fighters, like they've been fighting ever since they're like, 10, 11, 12. And
that's a great point.
But they're full of fear, so.
That's a great point. It actually empowers you to have less fear and like become less aggressive. Like, I mean, there are situations that I've been involved in where just because I knew that I had a plan and I had some skill, I didn't have to escalate the tension or raise my voice or get angry or put on this front of aggression.
You're not reacting as much. And like, I know there was a couple of times where I started getting through the white belt curriculum and stuff and starting to train with more in our school, it's divided up a little bit more with an in-trade level program. And so we do the street readiness. And then once you get through that, you can go into the white to blue and the advanced curriculum, master classes. And so anyway, we're going through the different materials, and I was sparring more, like being in certain situations, like it's like your body has memory. And I started noticing myself and I'm like, would be rolling with Andre, our instructor, who's like one of the kindest, most helpful men. Like he went in to train jiu-jitsu to help initially women, he had a passion to help, basically people defend themselves and overcome evil or injustice, by through defense. If like a perpetrator is attacking them, he just is like that. Really, he has such a heart for justice and for good to triumph over evil. He's just that kind of guy, and he's super helpful, encouraging. And I noticed like I was getting really stressed even when I was rolling with him sometime, and he's not trying to hurt. I know he's not trying to hurt me.
No.
I know we're just in a training scenario, and as soon as I tap, it's over.
Yeah.
We start over again. It's all good. But
well, that's the reptilian brain taking over. Right?
Yeah, you're just like, whoa, like you're like just like so it's interesting how but the more you start doing it, it's like you start staying calmer. Yeah. And like what you're saying. It's inoculation. Yeah. So like what you could do is like where you could, you've been in these tense situations, like you said, and had you not been through training, you might have overreacted simply because your adrenaline's pumping and you're in like fight or flight mode, and you're like, we're gonna fight. We're not gonna let this happen. And yet but through the training, you're able to stay calm and be like, hey, I don't need to let things get out of hand here. And I have skill to calm things down and control myself. But then also, if things do escalate and I do need to defend myself or somebody else, I do have a plan here. I do have something I can draw on to try to minimize the damage, even for the person that's doing the attacking or has the evil motive, right?
That's actually, you touched on a couple great things there. One of the things I love about jiu-jitsu is the ability to control the situation, the physical force, the level, the spectrum of physical force that you can use in an altercation. Like you don't have to punch or kick anybody. I mean, you can put someone in a control position and like end a fight effectively, like with a full mount, right? I mean, if you hold someone down, it's demoralizing. They can't punch you. They can't do anything to you. And you're just laying on top of them, and you're like, you can just talk to them like, hey, are we good? You going to calm down? Right? So, and you see this with police officers who train specifically with grappling arts and jiu-jitsu, like Officer Craig. We talked about him earlier. They have a plan. They have the skill to deal with all these scenarios, and you can see that they have their frontal cortex active. Their ability to be aware of their surroundings while they're in the middle of somebody who's trying to take their gun and trying to maybe possibly kill them, but they've been trained. They have the proper training to deal with the situation where they can be aware and not just in the flight or flight mode where you just see red and it's like you're just throwing hands. And
right.
And that's another powerful, empowering aspect of this type of training is it inoculates you to all the different scenarios that you might be the most afraid of. Like, what if this dude comes up and bear hugs me or starts to choke me or is like grabbing me by the collar and punching me in the face? You have a plan. And it allows you to be in that mental space where you can think about it. You're probably going to be reacting on a lot of instinct and muscle memory, but then you can also access that conscious brain. Right. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I also have a mentor in ministry from New York named Bishop Joseph Matera, and he's been a real blessing in my life. And he was actually a lifetime martial artist. He's trained a bunch of different arts. And before he was a Christian, I mean, he had gotten into a lot of street fights as a kid. I mean, he had knocked out a bunch of people. Like he had very fast hands, and so like he was anyway. So of course he's been a Christian minister for like over, like almost probably around 40 years now. And he's a little younger than my dad, but almost my dad's age, and has adult children. So anyway, so he's still trained though through the years, but obviously he doesn't get into street fights anymore or anything like that. He's a great man of integrity and everything, but he's enjoyed the development and the discipline of training. And he actually started mentoring another young man in New York that was called Rolling Rev, and he was an IBJJF like winner of different tournaments, and so he's pretty respected in their community. And so like he started kind of rolling and training him a little bit of jiu-jitsu, and Bishop Joe travels a lot, and so he, it's jiu-jitsu is hard if you don't have a training partner. I mean, you can do some solo drilling, but you really obviously you need a partner. So he was always like, I didn't know if I've always wanted to do it, but I've been traveling too much. But a gym opened like literally like right down the street from his house that he can walk to.
Oh, perfect.
And his wife's Lebanese, and some of the gym, I don't know if the gym owner's Lebanese or some of the guys that manage it or whatever. And so they're like, brother. And so, and they all know he's a minister, and they're all like, just welcomed him right in. So he's just actually not that long ago started training, but he was like, one of the things I like best about training, he's like, is just being with guys. Like, he goes, I just like being with guys. Like, there's not a lot of environments where men, and obviously there's women that train too. And it's, my wife trained for a while, and she wants to get back to it when the family schedule allows, but she's just crushing it at homeschool right now, and so she's kind of got locked into her format. But I think there's not a lot of spaces. I mean, maybe in a softball league or a bowling league, where men kind of get together and wrestle and pray, and it kind of I really enjoy that with my friends and my dad growing up. And I think that's part of what drew me back is I did want the confidence of self-defense too. I mean, that was definitely a piece of it, but I think I liked being around guys and just doing some guy stuff. Yeah. And it's not even that deep necessarily, but I feel like it does satisfy some kind of like a place in my heart.
That's important. I think, men have difficulty making friends in general. I think we're a lot of times islands unto ourselves, and we bond through activities. Yeah. We bond through physical activities and doing tasks like building a house together. There may not be a whole lot of conversation, but just by doing these things together. And then what's unique about jiu-jitsu is I think you have an environment where men can test their mettle against each other and kind of get that competitiveness out, and almost simulate, like full combat to the point of death. It's like a game of tag, really, because we tap out, just before the lethal point, right? Right. But you have, and that's an intimate bonding thing. Right, because then it's like if you and me are sparring and your safety's in my hands and my safety's in your hands, there's a lot of trust involved. Right. But at the end of the day, we both we get to get our competitive juices going, and it's like we're also learning from each other. We're tempering our egos too. Right. Right. There's this whole a lot of guys that come in and they start jiu-jitsu and maybe they think that they've done a lot of really good stuff, or maybe they're really tough. And just the environment of jiu-jitsu is very tempering to the ego because everybody's terrible at it when they first start, right? I don't care who you are.
You make a lot of mistakes.
You're going to get choked out by the 120-pound female purple belt like every 30 seconds. Yeah. Right? And that's a very humbling thing, right? So as men, we get together and it's like you learn. Like, oh wow, I have a lot to learn because I just got humbled by my friend who is, I should be able to beat him. You walk in with this idea, like, oh, I'm so much bigger and stronger than him, right? And it humbles you and it puts you in this place to be a better listener and more open to that person, as who they are, right?
Right. I felt like for me, like I had a defensiveness against like correction. I like a drivenness to perform or do well. So it's like kind of a crucible for me, and it's already helped me a lot. And I'm sure I can grow more. But when people would point out something wrong or something I needed to address, I would take it too personally. And obviously in jiu-jitsu, you have to you're getting corrected every time you learn something new because you're almost always doing it wrong first. And then if you were doing it right, it would have worked. And so when it's failing, it means your body's out of position, your hand's in the wrong place, your weight shifted in the wrong direction. There's something that you're not paying attention to. And so
the feedback is 100%.
Right. Yeah. And the feedback is through the actual failure or success of the technique and through the verbal instruction of your coach or your training partner. Like you're saying, like you have to be more open to like learning from each other and saying like, why did that work? Or how were you able to do that? Or what were you, what could I have done when I got stuck?
Yeah,
in
exactly.
That situation.
It's like the moment I think I've got something figured out, someone comes along and just humbles me. Right. And then it brings you back to that place of like, oh yeah, I'm not that hot. It's like, and that's good.
Yeah,
that's good.
Exactly. I mean, it's very good.
We should all be just in this frame of mind
it's
where
important.
Like, there's more to learn. There's always more to learn, and that, there's opportunities to continue being in this state of humbleness and openness, and it tempers it doesn't put the ego away. The ego doesn't die, right?
Right.
But it gets us into this state where we're just more humble and more open.
Right. Yeah. It's important. I know, we had talked in the parking lot, I think, after class the other day, about this guy, Jason Wilson, that's been going viral with his books, Cry Like a Man and Battle Cry. And then he's been interviewed by a lot of the big podcasters. And he does this Cave of Adullam training academy for young men in Detroit, and he uses martial arts to help them with self-development lessons, and then it allows boys, and so it's a mentoring program and it's martial arts, so they know when they're signing up that they're getting like mentored in life, not just martial arts, so it's a bigger program, because obviously there's some, even Nate brought it up, there's some martial arts schools or like jiu-jitsu instructors that could take the role of life coach, and they really shouldn't probably have that access into your life, right? But for this program it's different, because that's what they're signing up for, so it's like that going in. But anyway, he talked about, in one of his interviews recently, he talked about how he had done martial arts for a long time, and he trained with some old school guy. Like, they brought real knives out and they trained on concrete floors, and it was like a really brutal. He said it was like he was deeply afraid every time he trained. But the guy was just he stuck with it. But it was just intense. But he said it was actually when he started training jiu-jitsu, which was later on in his journey, and even though arguably the other stuff he had done was scarier with knives and like punches and kicks and concrete floors, and now you're on pads and you're wrestling and you can tap out and stop, and it's safer in a lot of ways, of course. But he said having another man grapple with him is having another guy in your space, and that confronted him. And he said if you watch any of his training videos of him doing workouts or punching a bag, the dude is a beast. He's a strong man, and he's very well trained for many years. He's given himself to excellent training for decades. So he's
really sharp.
But he's but then I get beat by these guys in grappling, that aren't even as big as me, and I have that guy that I have to deal with him up. Literally in my face, fully hugging him, so in that intimate space, that you don't let a lot of people into that space in your life. And so it was interesting to hear him with all that background talk about how jiu-jitsu helped him in a whole nother aspect, and deal in a sense with another area of weakness where you would think, well, you've already trained and you've already gone through all that. But he's like, no, there was another layer that I had to kind of work through.
Yeah, and that humility allows. I think it can remove a man's hang-ups about showing compassion and showing, just being the more gentle side coming out. You have the confidence to be like, hey, I can be gentle and compassionate, and it not look down upon or not even care.
Right.
Well, that's your issue. You think that just because I'm giving somebody a hug, or whatever, that's your hang up,
Yeah.
And coming back to masculinity, right? The view of masculinity, it's interesting. That's a whole interesting topic.
Right.
Modeling what that means for your family and for your sons, and walking in humility, being modeled by Christ. Christ is the model, right? For the father, the family unit, the husband, right? So I don't see masculinity as having to conquer the biggest mountain or lift the most weight or this and that. It's really, your role defined by God as through Christ and Scripture. Can you live your life with integrity and honesty and do the things you say you're going to do, have this honor, so to speak. And those elements are not exclusively masculine.
Right.
Obviously, women
Right.
can be very honorable, honest, have
Oh yeah,
integrity.
absolutely.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that there's a defined role, I think, in the family unit.
Yeah.
And as a father, I think sons specifically relate to their fathers in different ways that they would relate to their mothers.
Yep.
And rightfully so. I mean, they're probably looking at their dads or positive male role models. Like, how does my dad interact with other people? How does my dad deal with stress? How does my dad deal with anger? How does all of these things? And, you know, we're all human. We're not perfect. We're all fallen, you know, sinful creatures that need a savior. And coming back to the model that Jesus modeled, I didn't see Jesus running around winning jiu-jitsu competitions.
Right.
You know, he that wasn't the model. But the training that we get and the humbling that we get, it just sort of like allows you to kind of look at your life and go, okay, you know, here's what the expectation is, you know.
Yeah.
And what do I want to pass on to my children? You know, aside from one of the most powerful aspects of being saved by Jesus, my soul, was, I think, you know, the spiritual head of the home, being the spiritual head of the home, and what do I speak into my children's lives? So when I think about, like, back to my dad and how he was kind of unwittingly guiding me in that, because, you know, I grew up in a secular home. We didn't know Jesus, right? But my role as a father, and you add in the biblical aspect, it's like, the expectation from God is that I am there to give a path to my children, to my boys. And if I had daughters, the same thing. Yeah. And what is unique about a father that is expressed to those children? Yeah. You know, it's a real honor.
Yeah, big time, right?
Yeah.
Big honor, big responsibility.
Yeah. And so tying back to martial arts, it's like it's just another mechanism to help filter, like, hey, as a man in society, if you're going to uphold these ideals, these morals of honor, integrity, and forthrightness, and following the Lord and worshiping God, that mechanistic aspect of martial arts it's like a tool. Right. But it's not something we put on a pedestal. Right. It's just something we can do physically in this world.
Exactly. Do you, well, you brought up a couple things there that I had already been thinking about, and even a conversation I had with my friend on this podcast, Phil Manginelli. I think I just put it out last week. Yeah. You know, we talked about that similar concept as you. And Jason Wilson, he coined the phrase. I was trying to find out if it was him, but as best I can tell, he coined a phrase like comprehensive masculinity. We need to become comprehensive men. We need to learn to be like tough, and I don't know if he's a tough and tender, but, you know, like courageous and compassionate. We need to be able to be the lion and the lamb, and like, and I think what you're saying is powerful because, and even like when I was talking with Phil, he was saying, you know, like, well, I think strength is a masculine virtue, but we tend to incorporate, and not that women can't be strong, but, you know, but Jesus is a strong person, strong convictions, strong integrity, confronts things that stand against his mission or that keep people away from God in religiosity, you know. But he's like, but we tend to think of, when we hear strength as a man, we think of like brute strength, winning a fight, lifting the most weight, picking up a sword,
shooting the gun,
you know, killing somebody,
fighting evil, crushing evil.
Yeah. But he's like, what if you're strong in your intellect, or strong in your ability to invest, strong in your business, strong in relationships, like that help other men, that like maybe you're not the strongest of physical stature, but develop a strength in your life. Like, where are the areas that you can show and demonstrate strength in a Christ honoring way? Then like develop yourself in those areas, and like having those, you know, getting back to like reclaiming those virtues. And obviously you even expressed it through some of your, you know, training in the Marines, and I think that's really powerful, you know, integrity and being a trustworthy person, following through on your word. Like these are all really Christian values, you know, but they do they do end up in other areas of society as well. When people follow those principles, there's success, you know, there's fruitfulness or, you know, productivity that comes from following, you know, God's eternal, timeless principles, you know. So that's powerful. So what would you say, like, of course we talked about military and martial arts here quite a bit, and a little bit about masculinity, but what was it like finding I should say not you finding Jesus, but Jesus finding you, or, you know, God stepping into your life, you had been through the military, you had some positive influence from your dad, obviously, you played sports, you had a level of success, you had served your country, you had a career path, but yet there was still something as a man that was missing.
All meaningless compared to being saved by Jesus. Yeah, like I said, so just a quick overview. Growing up, I grew up in a secular, like humanism was probably the religion of my house, right? So both my parents are college educated. My dad is an incredibly intelligent man. You know, history professor level education. He's a software developer. But so, and I didn't know Jesus. I didn't know anything about Christianity other than people worshiped Jesus and went to church, and that was it. And my interactions with them were, I think the one Christian that stood out the most to me was a guy in high school named Kevin Hiller, and he was definitely set apart. He was different. He carried his Bible everywhere, and he definitely lived a life set apart. I mean, he was a good example as far as Christians go. But outside of that, I couldn't tell the difference. You know, in the world, people would just say they're Christian. So fast forward, I end up meeting Christina, right? And we were kind of dating. We were like dating, but not dating. It was sort of known that we were into each other. And then it got to the point where the relationship got to the point where she was like, you know, if we have a future, I'd like you to know Jesus and know Christianity because it's really important to me. And if we say get married, I would hope that we're both on the same page as far we're equally yoked. Right? And I cared a lot for Christina. I loved her. And I was like, okay, if I want to keep her, I think I should definitely investigate this. And, you know, at the time, some of my close friends were Christians, like Ian, right?
What a great guy.
Love Ian. He's a brother. And I could see in their lives, you know, Christianity from afar, from proxy. And so she started bringing me to your church. And that was my first real exposure to people who called themselves Christians in church. And everyone was, you know, very nice and happy, and there was a genuineness there. Like, okay, like these people are not just faking it. I really feel like they care about me. But why is that? I mean, this is weird, you know. I mean, and then I started, you know, I was listening. Your dad was the pastor at the time, listening to his teachings, and being an atheist. I was basically an atheist. I was like, this is so, like, literally a foreign language to me. It felt like that.
Just like weird, right? Like, like foreign.
I just didn't get it. Like, okay, we're talking about some guy going up a mountain, and you know, and to fast forward this a little bit, Christina, she sat me down. She's like, "Have you ever seen Jesus of Nazareth? You know, the old '70s movie." And I was like, "No." And so we sat down and watched. It's like a 3-hour movie, and it's basically just about the life of Jesus.
Right.
That movie blew me away because I had no idea. And I looked at it from a very secular view of like, okay, if this guy actually existed and did what he did, just as a person, he's like philosophically worth following. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, his values, the way he treated the poor and you know, just lived his life. So then it was a question of his deity. Okay.
Right.
That was the big linchpin.
Yeah.
And, you know, being in church and then your dad would do the altar call once in a while. And if anybody here, you know, would like to profess their faith in Jesus and, you know, raise your hand and we all close our eyes and do that thing. And I remember praying like for like, God, if you're real, please reveal yourself to me, that kind of thing. And I didn't actually pray like, you know, believe it, like, yes, you're Lord and Savior. But that started my investigation. I started reading books by Lee Strobel and looking at comparative religions and looking at Islam, and I'm like, okay, why is Christianity set apart? What is it that makes them the truth?
Right.
And one of the really powerful things was I could see the thousands of years of prophecy that had come true through Scripture that was also corroborated by archaeological evidence.
Right. Yeah, it's weighty when you see that. If people haven't given themselves to any of that study, it's amazing.
It's specific. It's not like, oh, some guy's going to show up someday.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like to the letter, and this is passed down through the Hebrew nation.
Yeah. And a lot of people don't realize, like, even in the gospel, the good news message of Christianity, like when it's in the Bible, Paul says things like Christ who died for our sins and according to the Scriptures, and he was buried and he was raised again according to the Scriptures.
Yes.
And what he's saying is that our faith is rooted not in just a story, but it's a reality, it's a historical reality that's corroborated by, when he says according to the Scriptures, he's referring to all those prophecies that you're talking about, these hundreds and thousands of specific details that could only be.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, sorry, I want to
And then when you
going.
get to the witness of Christ's resurrection, 500 people, are they actually seeing what they're seeing or having a mass hallucination together, which has never happened, right?
Right.
So I'm putting all these things together, and then it just dawned on me. I'm like, only God would come and tell the truth and stay so consistent, and his character would stay so consistent, and have so many witnesses and miracles, right?
Yeah.
And it just became truth to me. And I was actually telling Jason out there about how one day I was having a rough day at school, and Anna, his wife, and Angel and my wife Christina were at their apartment, and I was having a really rough day, and I was going over there, and I literally prayed with them. They prayed over me. I prayed, Lord, I believe that you are my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. And like, it was like a weight lifted off. Like, it was like 1,000 pounds. I can only describe it like I could see the world in a whole new way. Like, I was finally seeing the truth. And I've never been the same.
Yeah.
I mean, that was when I became saved, and and Jesus became a part of my life that hopefully will never end.
And that's right.
For eternity.
Yeah, that's right. Man, that's amazing. So you just feel like that was really the missing piece in all the other.
Yeah. So, up until that point, I was trying to find all of my stability and self-worth and sense of belonging through everything but Jesus. And now my world is formulated by him and the Bible and, his truth, standing on his truth.
Yeah. Wow. It's amazing. Well, let me ask you this question as we start to wrap up here. If you're dad now and you've got a 13-year-old and a 9-year-old, right? 2 boys. And, like if you could instill, like I don't know if you can whittle it to one thing, but like if you could instill something in your 13-year-old that you wish you would have known when you were 13, what would you want him to know more than anything else? Like at the core of his being as he starts to enter into this manhood journey?
Well, the number one thing would be having faith in Jesus Christ as his Lord and Savior. Yeah. Because everything stems from that. I mean, everything that we do here on earth and into eternity should echo from that foundation. Yeah. And I would hope that he could see that as truth. I'm not going to force him. You can't force someone to love God. Right. But that's part of my job as a father is to like, hey, this is what we worship God. This is the Bible, and study it, learn it, know it. Yeah. This will carry you through everything. And I would hope that is what he would be focused on.
Yeah.
Because everything after that is just,
Mm-hmm.
you know. So yeah, that would be the number one thing.
Yeah.
Outside of that, are you looking for just more like living life stuff?
Yeah.
Or?
Yeah. Anything like about identity, about his purpose, or about how he feels about himself or the world.
Yeah. Just
I do think that you're right. Number one, Jesus is going to be number one.
Yeah. Coming back. Yeah. Number one. Because the Lord will lead him,
Mm-hmm.
you know, to do the right thing and,
Mm-hmm.
you know, be convicted in the right way, you know,
Yeah.
in any situation. So he can lean on Jesus, right?
Yeah.
It outside of that, it's, you know, be kind, you know, treat people with compassion, you know, love them, you know, teach them the gospel, you know, lean on that.
That's good.
To me, the most important thing for my kids is to know the Lord and to live
Same for me.
in a humble, you know, compassionate way, you know, but speak the truth, you know, stand for the truth, which, you know, you can be compassionate and speak the truth at the same time.
Yeah.
And, you know, the world is going to have their view of how things are going to go, right? And that's the big challenge, right?
Right.
Because the world might put you literally in prison, or execute you for standing on the truth,
right?
You know,
that's what history tells us. Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that we have to, you know, fall into the baser response of like hurting someone physically or emotionally, you know,
right?
Trying to tear them down, you know, force them to believe in Jesus or something like that.
Right.
You know, that's not what we're called to do.
No.
Yeah.
No.
So.
Oh no, that's wonderful, and I just want to say how much I appreciate you, Christopher, as we wrap up.
Yeah, it's been good. I feel like I've just been rabbit hole.
Oh man, I love it. I like the unscripted conversations.
Yeah,
and I think there's a lot of meaningful nuggets that you shared that, you know, I wasn't looking for anything more than a good conversation, and I've enjoyed that I've had one, so I always feel like that translates.
Me too. You're one of my favorite people, so I love talking to you.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah. But I just want to say, like, I just want to honor you because I see you as a man of honor and integrity, and I see you live that out. And I've just being a friend and following you, whether it's through social media or in-person conversations, it seems like over the years, even your desire for truth and integrity overrides your is more important to you than appearing right with any certain crowd, but really living your life before the Lord and just wanting to walk in truth, his truth, and truth in society and culture. And I really respect that about you. And I can tell that you care about other people. I can tell you care about me and you care about others that we train with. And I see that you're a man that, and we didn't really talk about this a lot, but I just want to honor you for it. But because I see it as a thread in your life, whether it's through your Marines training, maybe part of your upbringing too, but in Jiu-Jitsu, like, you're a man that develops yourself. And so whether it's you keep developing yourself through Jiu-Jitsu, and you've been doing it for over 10 years, and yet you still keep developing yourself and helping others develop, you develop yourself spiritually, and you study and you grow and you read and you watch, you know, videos from lectures and scholars, and you learn. And then and when it comes to, we didn't even talk about the investing world or anything, but I think that's another area that men really need to learn to develop.
I'd love to talk about that.
Yeah,
that's another thing.
Yeah, learn about investing, and like you develop yourself you've given yourself to development. And I hope that one of the outcomes I hope for doing this podcast is that young men are just encouraged to, and really men of any age are encouraged to, like, make more of their life by developing themselves and not fleeing when they fail and giving up, but continuing to apply themselves to situations that can cause them to grow, you know, for their own sake, for the sake of Christ and the gospel, for the sake of their families. So I'm just really appreciate you and value you, and thank you for your time today.
Same
And
here.
who knows, maybe we'll end up seeing one of these listeners on the mats with us
That'd be awesome.
in the future, and say,
love
hey,
it.
I tried it out because you guys talked about her.
Yeah.
Who knows, maybe somebody will even go serve our country because
more than
of
welcome.
talks like this with you, or that I had with Nate, that would inspire somebody to take a course for their life that could really open up a lot of doors. It's a great cost, of course, but could really could really help them as a man too. So thank you, man, and blessings
Thanks,
to your
John.
wife and children as well, your
Blessings.
family. All right.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks for joining the John Hammer Show. Please give us a thumbs up, like, and subscribe if you're enjoying the content here. And the best way to support this podcast is leaving us a great review. Thanks.